Two people, same city, same job title, same take-home pay, same age. By the time they are 40, one of them has built something that looks completely different from the other. Not because one was smarter, not because one got lucky, because at 24 or 25 or 26, they stood at the same fork and walked in opposite directions, and neither of them was certain they had chosen correctly. That is the part nobody tells you. Both paths can work. Both paths have a real cost. The mistake is not choosing one over the other. The mistake is choosing without understanding what you are actually choosing between. Here is what most people think the question is. Should I buy a house or keep renting? That is the wrong question. The real question is this: do you want liquidity and flexibility right now, or do you want forced savings and structural stability? Those are not the same trade. They do not feel the same to live inside. And they do not produce the same outcomes depending on who you are and what the next decade of your life actually looks like. Start with the myths, because there are two of them and they pull in opposite directions and they are both wrong in ways that cost people money. The first myth is that renting is throwing money away. You have heard this. Someone's uncle said it at a dinner table. A coworker mentioned it when you told them what your rent was. It gets repeated because it sounds logical. You pay rent, you own nothing, therefore the money is gone. But you also pay for groceries and you own nothing afterward. You pay for a gym membership, you pay for a car. You are not throwing money away when you pay rent. You are paying for a place to live. That is what shelter costs. The homeowner pays for shelter too. They call it mortgage interest, property taxes, insurance, and maintenance. In the early years of a 30-year mortgage at a typical rate, the overwhelming majority of each monthly payment is interest. It does not build equity. It pays the bank. Renting is not inherently worse than that. It is a different mechanism for the same cost. The second myth is that a home is an investment, the way a stock is an investment. It is not. A stock in a total market index fund is liquid. You can sell it on a Tuesday afternoon in 7 minutes. A house is not liquid. It costs 5 to 6% to sell it in agent commissions alone. It requires maintenance. It does not pay dividends. It does not compound. Historically, residential real estate in the United States has appreciated at roughly 1% per year above inflation when you account for the full cost of ownership. The S&P 500 has returned approximately 7% annually above inflation over long periods. Those are not the same thing. A house is shelter that may appreciate. An index fund is a financial asset that historically has. The confusion between them is where most people go wrong before the conversation even starts. Now, here are the variables that actually decide the outcome. There are 4 of them. The first is time horizon. If you're planning to stay in a city for 10 or more years, the math on buying begins to favor you in ways that compound quietly. If there is a real possibility you move in 3 or 5 years, the transaction cost of buying and selling can erase years of equity gain in a single closing. The second is mobility. This is different from time horizon. Mobility is about optionality. A renter can take a job in another city in 60 days. A homeowner has a process. It takes months. It costs money. It requires a market willing to buy at the right moment. If your career is in a phase where opportunity could come from anywhere, that optionality has a value that does not appear on any spreadsheet, but is absolutely real. The third is risk tolerance. Homeownership is a leveraged position in a single illiquid asset in a single geographic market. If that market runs hot, you benefit significantly. If it stagnates or falls, your largest asset stagnates or falls with it, and you cannot diversify away from it. Investing in index funds spreads that risk across thousands of companies in dozens of countries. Neither is safe. They are differently exposed. The fourth is discipline. This one is uncomfortable. For many people, a mortgage is the only savings mechanism that actually works because it is not optional. The payment leaves your account whether you feel like saving that month or not. If you are the kind of person who would invest the difference between renting and owning, the math may favor renting and investing. If you are the kind of person who would spend the difference, the forced equity of a mortgage may be the more useful structure. Be honest about which one you are. The answer matters more than any interest rate comparison. Opportunity cost is the concept that ties all of this together, and it is simpler than it sounds. Every dollar you put toward a down payment is a dollar not invested somewhere else. If a $60,000 down payment had instead gone into a total market index fund at age 26, what would it be worth at 45? That is the question. Not whether buying is good, whether buying is the best use of that specific capital at that specific moment for that specific person. You can estimate your version of this in about 10 minutes, and what you find when you run those numbers is going to be the entire rest of this conversation. So let's run the numbers honestly, not the ones the mortgage officer shows you, All of them. The purchase price is the number people negotiate. It is not the number they pay. On a $300,000 home, the down payment at 20% is $60,000. Closing costs add another 2 to 4%, typically $6,000 to $12,000. That is $66,000 to $72,000 out of pocket before you own a single square foot. Then you move in. Furniture, appliances, a weekend at the hardware store for something the inspector flagged but did not price. Call it $5,000 to $8,000. You are now $70,000 to $80,000 into a transaction before your first mortgage payment clears. That first mortgage payment is where the amortization reality lands. On a $240,000 loan at 6.75% over 30 years, your monthly principal and interest is roughly $1,557. In month one, approximately $1,350 of that goes to the bank as interest. About $207 reduces the actual balance. You are not building equity aggressively. You are renting money from the bank at a rate that front loads their profit. This inverts slowly over the life of the loan, but in the first 5 years, the majority of every payment is interest. When someone says they are building equity, they are often describing appreciation and down payment more than they are describing paydown. Those are different things. Add property taxes, add homeowners insurance, add the maintenance reserve. The standard guidance is 1% of the home's value annually. On a $300,000 house, that is $3,000 per year, $250 per month, set aside for the water heater, the roof, the HVAC, the plumbing surprise behind the wall that was not visible during inspection. That reserve is not optional. It is the cost of owning something physical that degrades. Total monthly ownership cost on that home, somewhere between $2,200 and $2,600, depending on your tax rate and insurance market. That number is real, and it is higher than most 26-year-olds expect when they are looking at the mortgage payment alone. Now, the trade-offs that do not appear in any lender's disclosure. Mobility. In your 20s, the career decisions that change your trajectory often require geographic flexibility. A promotion, a better company, a field that is concentrated in a different city. A homeowner can act on those opportunities, but not quickly and not cheaply. The transaction cost of selling a home is typically 6 to 8% when you include agent commissions and closing. On a $300,000 home, that is $18,000 to $24,000, leaving the table before you net $1 of gain. If you bought and sold within 3 years and the market was flat, you likely lost money on the transaction even if the house appraised higher. The relationship dimension is real too. A home purchased alone becomes complicated when circumstances change. A partner, a separation, a family situation that requires you to be somewhere else. The asset that was supposed to provide stability can become a negotiation, a forced sale, a financial problem at exactly the wrong moment. Risk factors compound differently in your 20s. Income is less stable. A repair shock that costs $4,000 lands differently at 27 on a $58,000 salary than it does at 38 on a $95,000 salary. Local market, 1,000 salary. Local market concentration means your largest asset and your largest liability are tied to the same zip code. If the employer base in your city contracts and you need to move, you are selling into a market that is softening for the same reason you are leaving. But here's where the honest accounting goes in the other direction, because the benefits are also real. A fixed rate mortgage is an inflation hedge. The payment you lock in at 26 is the same number at 46. Rent is not. Over 20 years, the difference between a fixed payment and a market rate rent in the same city can be measured in hundreds of thousands of dollars of effective savings. That structural advantage is durable and it builds quietly every year inflation rises and your payment does not. The forced savings mechanism matters. Equity accrues whether you're thinking about it or not. For people whose investment discipline is inconsistent, that automatic, involuntary accumulation is not a consolation prize. It is a genuinely useful financial structure. And housing stability has a value that does not fit in a spreadsheet. Roots, neighbors, a school district, a city you know. Those are not irrational things to want. They are part of what a house actually is. The break-even calculation is where all of this resolves into a number. Most financial models put the break-even horizon between 5 and 7 years in a typical market. Below that threshold, renting and investing generally wins. Above it, the compounding stability of ownership begins to compete seriously. When does buying in your 20s become the strategically correct move? When you have a genuinely stable location plan. When you're in a market where the price to rent ratio is below 20, when you have the income and reserves to absorb repair shocks without disrupting your broader financial picture, when you're considering house hacking, renting a room or a unit to offset the mortgage, which changes the math entirely, and when your savings rate is high enough that the down payment does not hollow out your financial foundation for years. None of those conditions are age dependent. They are circumstance dependent. That is the actual question. Here is what the market offers that a house structurally cannot. When you invest the difference, you are not choosing between wealth and shelter. You are choosing the form your capital takes and how many jobs it works while you sleep. Compounding does not care about your zip code. It does not require a maintenance reserve. It does not charge 6% to exit. A diversified index fund holding position in 3,700 companies across 47 countries does not call you on a Tuesday because the roof needs flashing. The money stays liquid. The options stay open. That is not a minor feature. In your 20s, when the career decision that changes everything might still be 18 months away, optionality has a real dollar value that does not appear on any balance sheet. The real comparison is not house price versus portfolio balance. It is equity growth after all costs versus the compounding monthly difference invested consistently over time. Run it this way. The monthly cost differential between owning and renting in the same market, often $600 to $1,100 per month, deployed into index funds from age 23, compounds at historical equity averages of roughly 7% real return. By the time a buyer has 5 years of principal paydown and moderate appreciation, the disciplined investor who stayed liquid has often built a comparable or larger net worth with a fundamentally different risk profile. Diversified across thousands of positions, convertible in 48 hours, not concentrated in a single transaction in a single market. That does not automatically make it the right answer. It makes it a genuinely competitive one that most people never model because the cultural script skips the calculation entirely. So here is the decision framework, not a formula, a checklist you apply to your actual life. How long do you realistically plan to stay in one place? If the honest answer is under 5 years, the transaction cost of buying will likely erase any equity you build. The math is not close. If the answer is 7 or more years and you have reason to believe it, the calculus shifts meaningfully toward ownership. What are your cash reserves after the down payment? If closing costs and a down payment reduce your savings to under 3 months of expenses, you are buying into a high maintenance asset with no financial shock absorber, one repair event, and you're carrying consumer debt on top of a mortgage. That is a sequence risk that compounds badly. What does your debt picture look like? High interest debt changes every number in this conversation. Paying down a 19% APR credit card is a guaranteed real return that no index fund matches. A mortgage on top of unresolved high-interest debt is not an investment strategy. It is a layered liability. Is your emergency fund intact and separate? Not the down payment savings. A separate, untouched fund of 3 to 6 months of expenses that does not shrink to close a real estate transaction. This is not negotiable. The water heater does not check your mortgage balance before it fails. And finally, what is your actual stress tolerance with volatility? The investor who sells in a market correction has not beaten housing. They have lost to it. If watching a balance drop 18% in 6 weeks causes behavior changes, that is information about which structure fits your psychology. A fixed mortgage payment and rising home equity is a less volatile emotional experience for many people. That is a legitimate input into a personal financial decision. Now the practical middle ground, because the binary is false. You can invest aggressively while renting and accumulate a larger down payment that buys at 30 or 32 with better terms, lower PMI risk, and a financial foundation that does not crack under the first repair cost. You can buy and continue investing at the same time if the purchase is sized correctly, meaning you're not house poor, not pause on retirement contributions, and not carrying the mortgage on a single fragile income. The rules that prevent most regret in either direction are not complicated. Keep a cash buffer that you do not touch for the down payment. Do not pause retirement investing for more than 2 quarters for any housing-related reason. If you're maxing an employer match and nothing else, protect that match before every other financial decision. Do not buy at a number that requires you to stop all other investing for 18 months. That 18 months in this script became 22. For some people, it becomes 4 years. The compounding gap that opens in that window is real, and it does not fully close. Both paths built wealth in this comparison. The one that did not was the one that treated housing or the market as a single bet and stopped the system entirely. The only question that matters now is which next step you will actually take today. Run your specific numbers using a rent versus buy calculator with your actual market's price to rent ratio. Set an automatic monthly investment if you have not started, or sit down and map a realistic home buying timeline with the full cost picture included, not just the mortgage payment. The system you choose at 23 will compound, so will the one you choose at 29 or 34 or the Tuesday after you finish watching this. Pick the one that fits your life and start it before the tab closes.